You're listening to episode 91 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Victoria Coglianese about how we can use our faith to reclaim our ability to thrive. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm your host, Laura Schoenfeld, a registered dietitian, nutrition business coach, and online entrepreneur with over 10 years of experience in online business. And I'm here to show you everything I've learned about creating a life and a business that nourishes you. On this podcast, we'll talk about the lifestyle habits, practical strategies, mindset shifts, and leaps of faith required to build a healthy body, a powerful mind, a strong spirit, and a successful business. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, your host as always, and our conversation today is one that I had a lot of fun having, and I think my guest enjoyed it as well. It got a little bit out there as far as the different things that we talked about, and we dove a little bit more into the faith-based side of the health equation, which is always a little bit of an interesting conversation. But I really think the conversation we had was very important, and if you guys know me, you know that I love sharing truth. I love helping people. I love making sure that people are able to live their best life. And sometimes that means people need to be shaken a little bit from the things that they're doing that are not actually helpful for their best health, their best business, whatever they're doing that they want to achieve a better result. I like to make sure that they know if something is holding them back. So, I don't pull any punches. Hopefully that's why you're here, because you like that kind of stuff. And today's episode is definitely one where we go right for the truth as much as possible. So I'm super pumped to have with me today registered dietitian Victoria Coglianese. Victoria is a registered dietitian and business owner of Wonderfully Made Nutrition, who practices a functional nutrition approach to help people with chronic gut health issues, autoimmunity, and PCOS to overcome their conditions by addressing underlying gut and hormone root causes. She believes wholeheartedly that each person has an innate capability to thrive, and that we can reclaim that ability by learning to confidently make connections between what our bodies experience and our food choices, health behaviors, stressors, and mindset. Victoria considers her work to be a true mission in life to help people finally find freedom from complex health issues and renew their hope that they have been truly wonderfully made. And Victoria has been part of my audience for several years now, and we have a lot in common as far as our perspective on functional medicine, nutrition, as well as faith. So as you can imagine, I got really engaged with our conversation and definitely took it some places that we weren't necessarily planning for, but I think they were really powerful. And I'm hoping that those of you listening will really benefit from our conversation today. So I know I've talked it up, and I know you're itching to hear the conversation. So without further ado, here is Victoria Coglianese. All right, everybody. Well, I am so excited to have with me on the show today, Victoria Coglianese. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Victoria.
Hey, Laura. Thanks for having me here.
Well, I'm super pumped to have you because I know that I think the way you found me as a business coach was through this podcast. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, I've been listening to you since the other podcast before that too. So, and then kind of kept looking at your articles and stuff. And then when I knew that you were running the business coaching program, I knew I had to get on it. So.
Oh, well, it's quite the full circle moment then to have you here.
Yeah.
And I'm super excited to have you on the show. And for our listeners that haven't gotten the chance to meet you yet, if you don't mind just telling us about your story, your personal health journey, and how that led you to practice a functional approach in your nutrition business.
Yeah, well, I am a registered dietitian and I do practice a functional nutrition approach. I started my own business 2 years ago doing private practice. It's called Wonderfully Made Nutrition. But my own, it's a personal health story that really led me here. And it really started with, I think, about 7 years of binge eating. Kind of, I didn't really know it was a problem until it started becoming more hidden in my life. And I knew that it wasn't good. And I knew I also wanted to go into nutrition in college, study that. So it became this very strange thing of like, I know this isn't what I should be doing. And I want to help people not do these types of things. Yet I'm still struggling with this in my own life. So it became kind of hidden for about 7 years of my life. And then unfortunately, senior year of college, I developed my own gut health issues. I started and I went through a lot of workup, and kind of got slapped with the diagnosis of IBS, which was at the time, I just took it for what it was and tried my best to kind of still continue to work on treating myself for the next couple of years and meeting with some doctors. But what I started to realize, as I became a dietitian working in clinical nutrition and still struggling with my own gut health issues on the side, I realized that there was a lot more to discover in terms of how to treat people with gut health issues or just how to really treat the root causes. And that had never been provided to me through, other doctors or practitioners. So I kind of started this journey of the last 7 years of my life, really seeking root causes and studying a lot more, which really led me to functional medicine and learning how to see the body, from the foundations of, the systems that are at play and how what were once just gut health issues became full body issues, and realizing that I'm not crazy by knowing that these all have to be connected. And they started to kind of compound on each other over time, but it actually led me to this awesome just understanding of how to help people and a real passion to help people. And in the midst of all that time, I still had to kind of heal from the binge eating disorder in the past. And for my story, that was a lot of spiritual healing that led me to have that healing. And I could say now that I have a lot of detachment from food, and it's just really beautiful. And I really see food for what it is, as being a real gift from God to nourish us and as a real means for, healing our bodies. So kind of led me to where I am today, and definitely love helping people with gut health issues. But I've been so excited to kind of broaden that to also women struggling with PCOS and hormonal health issues, because I see that there's actually a lot of crossover in what I can do to help both of those populations.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we know how common, if you think about IBS being like 1 in 5 and then PCOS being 1 in 10, it's probably a lot of women out there that are struggling with that. Either of those issues, both of those issues. And I know you don't just work with women, but obviously PCOS requires ovaries. So, and then what led you to start your own nutrition business? Because I know that was 2 years ago that you started that, which is usually a big leap for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of dietitians say they're like, oh, I don't know if clinical's right for me anymore. So they want to go to something else. But clinical work was what was available to me after my internship. And I think I was still interested enough in it. So I did clinical for a little while, but I knew pretty quickly when I became a dietitian that I think I wanted to start my own business one day. I started to realize that I really wanted to create something, and being an entrepreneur was really enticing to me. And I knew that it was going to require a lot of hard work. But I definitely wasn't ready for it like 5 or 6 years ago. So it was always in the back of my mind. I was always praying about it. And I got a lot of confirmation from the Lord of just even like the name Wonderfully Made Nutrition. That really came to me in like 2016. And I knew that that would be the name of it because this really spoke to me about, we are wonderfully made. So it was years of clinical work and then working actually in supermarket retail as a dietitian. And I loved those jobs, but I always felt like I wanted to be able to help people even more deeply. And I couldn't really do that in those settings. And I felt like at the time, living in central New Jersey, I wanted to stay here and be a part of my community. So I didn't want to move for a job. So I really felt like I had to create the work that I really wanted to do. And I have been so blessed to be able to help people and really dig into the root causes with them. So that led me to start my own business. And it's been a journey and a half. So here I am today, about 2 years in, and things have really changed since the day I started till now.
And what was the catalyst for taking the leap? Because I know I've worked with a few people who I literally made them quit their jobs. I feel like that's one of my things that I do is just make people quit their jobs. So what was it for you that really made you take that big step?
Yeah, well, I think kind of things were coming to a head, and I had been at my other job for almost 2 years. So I knew that it was time for me to move on. And I had another job opportunity and even potentially a third one. And I kind of had to make all these decisions within a weekend. And I had also been in the back of my mind thinking, I don't have to choose one of these jobs. I can also have this fourth option of my business, which I've been wanting to do for so long. And I really felt like I was in a new spot with that. And it was actually Pentecost. So, Christians celebrate Pentecost. And it was in June of 2019. And I ended up going to this all-night vigil, which I was not planning on staying past 10 p.m. But it was at 3 a.m. and there was a talk being given. And I was really kind of struggling with this idea of what am I going to choose? And I wrote it all out, pros and cons, and I just really felt the Lord speak to me actually through the words of the talk. And it was just the right time. So I really discerned that this was what the Lord wanted for me. And I was so grateful I've never had so much clarity and a discernment before. It was kind of just hit me like a ton of bricks. And ever since then, I've been able to rely on that and say, like, this is really what I was meant to do. And I think that has really saved me from a lot of doubt and fear. Even though I've had a lot of fears in the last 2 years, it really saved me from a lot of doubt, knowing that this is really what the Lord wants for me. And he's given me the means, he's given me my own experience to be able to bring that to other people.
I love it. And I'm like imagining you write this like pros and cons list and like God's just like, oh, I don't know if we need any of those, because I feel like I do the same thing sometimes. Like I'm very much like I want to do the right thing. I want to make the right decision. And I think for me, a lot of what's allowed me to be successful as an entrepreneur is the ability to like do things even when things don't feel super clear cut and take risks and, trust that God is providing for me. And even if I do the quote unquote wrong thing, that he can use that to grow things anyway. So that's just been something that honestly, sometimes I'm like, I wonder how people, if there's like atheist entrepreneurs, like how do they actually function? Because it's like you really have to take these really big leaps of faith and trust that no matter what happens, that God's going to take care of you. And a lot of times it doesn't always feel like you're getting taken care of because it's like, oh my gosh, the bank account or the credit card bill or whatever. But I know for me, like I can definitely look back and see even some of the biggest mistakes or failures, quote unquote, that I experienced as an entrepreneur, like that was actually leading me to where I am today. So I don't know if you have that experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think I'm so grateful again for like that crazy clarity that the Lord gave me at that moment and that summer, because like I said, the last 2 years have been really difficult. I mean, I had to wake up every day and kind of recommit myself and pray through fears. Because I mean, my Aunt Monica actually had said this a year and a half ago. She was kind of starting her own side business as well. And she's like, starting your own business pulls everything out of you personally. It's just like every vice, every like defective character that I feel like I have had and kind of have tried to deal with, but it really kind of came out in the last 2 years and I've had to deal with a lot. So I feel like there's this own personal journey, a spiritual journey that the Lord has actually called me to in this business too. And I'm so grateful for that. And that actually I feel like every day that I realize that allows me to have more strength and more confidence to actually like keep going forward and keep doing the next best thing. I've had a lot of growth in terms of just like business mindset. I was so scared and I made so many kind of stupid mistakes and just was really living a lot of fear. And it showed in the money that I was making for the first year. And then even just starting your program like that, I prayed about it and I was like, I have to do something. I need support too. I think I realized that I really missed the feedback that I used to get working with a team. And I felt like I really needed just extra support and just a game plan. And I knew that I had to kind of be humbled and say like, it's okay that I don't do everything on my own too.
Yeah, I feel that, especially the part about the entrepreneurship pulling all the garbage out of you.
Yep.
And that, fun fact, that never ends. Like you never get to a place in your business where suddenly you're like, oh, everything's great. And I'm like totally healed emotionally and everything's just like wonderful. So, but on the other hand, like I think actually I was talking to a friend this morning about how that's one thing that I really love about entrepreneurship is it does push you into this state where you have to deal with this stuff because if you don't, like, you're probably not going to have a successful business or you're going to have to quit. And what it's cool about it, and I don't know if you've noticed this, but I actually feel like it ripples out to so many other areas of my life. So like all the deep work I do to be able to grow my business ends up making my marriage better, making my friendships better, making my, dependency on God deeper. Like it's just I just wouldn't trade it for anything. I know it's like not for everybody, but it is something that I just get so jazzed up about. So I don't know if you've had a similar experience.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I definitely know that it's not going to end. I think this is going to be a continual challenge, but I think that I've had this realization that I've been more accepting of that. And like, I, can rise every morning and actually be excited for that challenge and not literally dread my day, which was what was happening for a while. And I know that is not how I wanted to live my life. And it did make me question things, but I realized that, there's a lot of challenges that I had to just kind of accept that that's life actually. And even like procrastination or avoiding certain things, I've been, other jobs in the past, I sometimes get away with it because there was this driving force of like the whole program there. But with me or with this business, it's like, if I don't do it, if I avoid, my clients are going to suffer like immediately because I'm not getting back to them or whatever it might be. The money shows from that too. Like I only get paid if I do the work. So yeah, definitely have experienced all of that.
Well, and I can always sidetrack into entrepreneurship conversations. So I'll make sure we get back onto the topic that I brought you on the show for. And I know that with the work that you do, there's a few different types of issues. You mentioned PCOS and gut health issues. I know that you and I have talked about how a lot of people that come to you to work with you are actually either looking for weight loss specifically, or weight loss is another huge area that they feel like they're struggling in. So what are some of the hidden reasons that you find that people are not seeing or they're not often being told about that somebody might be struggling with unwanted weight gain?
Yeah. And just to tie the two, it's like I work with people with gut health issues and I work with a lot of women with PCOS. And, I work with men as well with gut health issues and some other things too. But across the board, almost everyone I work with is also desiring weight loss or they're really struggling with weight loss resistance. And I can see that happening in kind of both of those categories because metabolism is being affected underneath it all. And so people come to me kind of at their wits' end. They've tried, a lot of different conventional approaches. They've met with a ton of different practitioners, maybe even some other dietitians. And they've kind of been given like the conventional wisdom, maybe like eat less, move more. And it just really hasn't worked for a lot of them. And sometimes it actually can be detrimental to them. As I know, Laura, you definitely know that from working with people. So they've been through that, but they've also maybe done some kind of better practices. Like they've tried to do some things that are a little bit more, I don't know, fun or niche, but they're not working as well. So it's like, okay, why is it not working? And they come to me and a lot of them have actually put in a lot of effort to the point that they're totally stressed out, even just from what they're doing. But I always like to say, like, I never want to tell someone like, oh, I just stress less or something like that can be really damaging because I know that like stress was there maybe to begin with, or their physical issues are causing physical stress in their body, which causes, emotional stress. And it becomes really hard to kind of get off of that. But what I like to help people with is really the mindset of like, I love to kind of bring this in the first conversation. Like, do you believe that your body has the capability to thrive? Like, do you believe that you can actually reclaim that in your body? And I do have, I didn't really talk about this earlier, but I do have a framework called my Health Freedom Framework. And it's these 3 F's. And the first one is faith. And that could be, actual spirituality, or there's just what do you believe? Even like just what your thought patterns are. Like, what do you even believe about food? Like, what's the purpose of food? Any myths that you believe or anything else? And that really forms our actions, which I actually call the food. So the second F, and that could be the actions of what we're eating. It could be what we're doing, exercise. It could be any lifestyle behaviors. And so our thoughts really impact then our actions, right? So we act upon what we're thinking. And then that bleeds into the final F is function. So what we're doing actually creates the function in our body. And then, it kind of the cycle goes around again. It's like, how do we interpret how we're feeling? And a lot of times people get to this place where, unfortunately, they're in a place of really poor health. And the way that they think about that is pretty detrimental. They're very stressed. They think that they have to continue doing what they were doing before, but like almost re-up that. Whereas like I like to tell them, like, we need to break that down, pull it back and say, why wasn't it working? And sometimes like that's a really hard part for them because I literally have to reteach them like about metabolism. Sometimes we do have to get a little granular about some science stuff, but really have to talk about like if exercising 6 or 7 days a week before at Orange Theory Fitness wasn't working for you, like if it wasn't causing weight loss for you and you felt like you were more fatigued, then like something needs to change. So we typically need to pull back and kind of go through this like period of rest and letting go and detachment and building anew from there. So I feel like that's where I kind of start with people.
Yeah, I love it. And it's funny, the 3 F's that you mentioned align really well with this model of coaching that I've been taught called the Be, Do, Have model. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah. And I think I actually was a little bit inspired by that, but I had my own little take on it. So,
well, yeah, I mean, it's pretty well known that there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah. Like even as much as we try to be as creative as possible, like we're probably not going to be the first person that ever talked about something. I mean, there are a few people that manage to be complete innovators like that, but most people aren't. But it's just interesting because that model, like usually the people, just generally people are going to do the have, do, be, or the do, have, be kind of thing. Like they're thinking like, oh, if I just had this, then I could do this and then I would be happy or I would be confident or whatever. So it's interesting that the way that you approach it is the same as the be, do, have, where it's like, who are you being? And the being is kind of what are your beliefs like about yourself, about the world, like how are you like showing up, all of that. And then the do is the actions, like what are the actions that are reflecting who you're being, right? Because I mean, you could say, oh, I'm like being this kind of person, but then do your actions actually reflect that? If not, then you're not actually being that person. And then with the have, those are the results that you get when you do those actions consistently. So it's kind of like you said, I'm sure yours is different because it's focusing on specifically health issues and specifically health behaviors, but it's really universal as far as a practice is concerned. And I feel like we're really learning a lot about the importance of identity when it comes to habit change, and the function of our bodies a lot of times is very related to the habits that we have. Like obviously not every single thing is related to our habits, but a lot of stuff is. And it's one of those things where if people are just trying to like beat themselves up about doing something because they think they're supposed to, but they're not really addressing their beliefs about themselves, their identity, that kind of thing, then they're most likely not going to be successful.
Yeah. I think going off of that too, identity is like one of the other things that I definitely bring up with most of my clients. I think especially a lot of the women I work with, like they're powerhouses, right? They're moms or they're super busy with different things. And so many of them, they kind of recognize it in their own self, but it's almost like cliche now to be like, yeah, I don't take time for myself, or like, yeah, I know I should take more time for myself, but I don't. But I really like to kind of dig into that a little bit more because I often see that a lot of the fear, the overwhelm that people have, and a lot of the, avoiding some of the, the things that would really be helpful for them comes from that mindset of like, I don't have time or I'm not a priority. And I really want to get down to like, if you made yourself a priority, how would that actually benefit the people that you want to benefit? And I think that comes back to, again, from a faith-based perspective, we really have to know who we are before the Lord, before we can actually know how to serve others. And I really like to talk about that with my clients because it affects everyone. I mean, even if you're dealing with gut health issues, it's like, well, a lot of them say, well, I couldn't change the way I was eating over the last couple of weeks because I didn't have the time or, whatever it might be. And it really, a lot of times there's a lot of identity there. And of course, like, I don't go super deep with that like a therapist would, but just enough conversation to actually bring some freedom in that part of their life.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, because you work with a lot of Christians in general, I think there's this like mindset in the Christian world that doing things for yourself is selfish. Any thoughts on that? Because I feel like that could be something that might come up a lot with people like feeling like they shouldn't put a ton of energy into their healing because it's selfish of them to focus on themselves instead of others.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's funny. I think for my own self, I almost had the emergency need to like take care of myself so much that I always felt like, oh, taking care of my health was like, I should be doing that. So I felt like if I didn't do that on a daily basis, like I really, really couldn't thrive at all that day. So for me, it's like, I had to kind of understand my clients and what they're going through there. I felt like I had an urgent need, but like the urgency is still there for them. And we want to talk about that. So I think with my clients, that's just a lie. It's just a lie. That's not what God wants from us. And I love talking to my clients too, that a health journey and experiencing new freedom in their health, that bleeds into every part of your life. And I even talk about like discipline breeds more discipline, and even just discipline in your health choices and your health behaviors and how that's changing your body actually does breed into discipline in other areas of your life. Like even just having a better prayer routine or something, just starting with certain discipline. Like when we start to see the success there and we see how that opens up our life and how it changes our mood that day, or it brings us new freedom to be able to do new things that we never could do because our health was too poor before. These things are necessary. And we need to realize that like God wants us to actually experience good health. And I know I'm definitely one to say though, that there are times in our lives or seasons where I think that suffering is definitely allowed and enabled by God. He's not causing it, but it's definitely allowed because there's a spiritual experience to be happened there. For the most part, we can get to the place where we can be aware of how might taking care of my body actually open new doors in my life and for many other people, and how can I serve people better because I am actually thriving better. And the way that we experience our health and the way that we are making decisions and the way that we're talking about things, like, that will change conversations that we're having with people. That'll change the way that we are able to relate with people and to love others because we actually have that first confidence in that the Lord loves us. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like we were saying before, a lot of this stuff ends up rippling out into so much of life in general, and even just the ability to serve others well. If you're not feeling well and you're distracted by like your gut hurts or with hormone issues, a lot of times people are like really tired and they just don't have the energy that they need to go do things for others, or they're kind of living more in a reactive state. Like, oh, I'll just like deal with problems as they come up, as opposed to really being proactive with how they set up their morning and kind of, starting the day in a way that, like you said, is a more disciplined thing, which, I mean, this is, I'm not the best at morning routines, but I am working on it because I do notice it making such a big difference when I do it. And so even if it's not my natural tendency to be consistently disciplined with a morning routine, I just know, oh my gosh, it makes so much of a big difference. And I'm just able to serve people better. I'm able to show up with better energy, better mood, that kind of thing. So I can actually be of better service to people when I am meeting my needs. So, but I feel like sometimes people don't even realize how much of an impact it's making because they've just lived like that for so long.
Yeah.
Or, and maybe you see this too, they just think it's normal because that's how everybody feels.
Yep. Yeah.
In their social circle. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll just say one more thing too about awareness. I actually often tell people as part of my protocol, if they're open to it, do an examine prayer that would literally go through your day and says what was I grateful for, but also what troubled me, what challenged me, and where was the Lord's presence throughout the day. And it enables us to even go back. And I'm like, if you felt like you were restricting that day, restricting your food because you have PCOS and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't, eat the potato at the meal with my friends because I felt like it was going to cause me to gain weight, or, potatoes are not allowed or something. It's I actually want them to bring these thoughts that they're having about their health into their prayer life too. And I always have to say, if we're mind, body, and spirit, then we truly are, and nothing is separated. So, no health behavior or no action is too small to actually pray about. So just want to say that. And I think that that's a way that spirituality can come into literally even the simplest things that we're doing to heal or overcome PCOS or to heal our gut health as well. But could you just remind me what your question was again?
Oh, just about how people a lot of times make assumptions about things that they're experiencing, symptoms that they're having, as being normal because that's just common, right? We live in a world, unfortunately, where most people have some kind of health issue. It seems like I wouldn't be surprised if it was, a large majority percentage. But because of that, especially as people age, people in their 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond, I think people just start to think, well, this is what aging is, or this is how, everybody feels. So this is normal. And they just kind of ignore it or push through it. Whereas obviously, I know you and I agree that we're not designed for chronic disease. And you were mentioning suffering. I do think there's a big difference between suffering something that you have no control over versus suffering because of choices you're making. And that can come across as a little harsh. But my point is to say, and this is for anybody, even us entrepreneurs, choices we're making on a day-to-day basis in our business, we're creating suffering for ourselves. And so if your actions are actually driving the suffering, I don't think that that's a situation where, oh, you just need to accept the suffering as that's just life, right? So what are your thoughts about that?
No, that's so key because we have so much responsibility in it. And part of learning what our responsibility is and actually having a new thought process behind it is really beautiful. And that can actually cause a new renewal in our lives. A lot of times I think that there's a lot of shame that can kind of come in with realizing oh, I actually have been eating a certain way or living a certain way for such a long time. That's actually been probably either exacerbating or if not causing issues, but maybe exacerbating. There's a lot of ways that we can get sick. Even gut health issues they can come upon us, but a lot of times we're more susceptible to them when we haven't been treating our bodies well for a while. But I always like to tell people, like, thank God you know now, and how can we go from here? And it's not a matter of like getting stuck in the shame, but it's like, now that I know, I have responsibility, and it's beautiful. Like, I have this new ability to actually do the Lord's will and to take care of my body. And that'll actually bleed into, like I said, every other part of your life, but also help many other people too. But yeah, I think that a lot of people just don't understand that kind of the status quo that is being shown out there in the world is really not how we're supposed to be living. I mean, I'm not one to say I'm not the food police by any means, but it's like, I think, fast food culture or something, like it's still so kind of pervasive, or eating a certain way or going to parties and eating certain things is still really pervasive as like kind of the norm of the way people eat. So I always have these conversations with my clients too, because I think that they end up going a little too far extreme of like, now I have to eat incredibly clean. And it's like, no, there's a balance, but it is saying, how can we start to understand the defects in our society, in our food system, in our healthcare system, but then also saying, okay, let me acknowledge what those are. Let me understand the better way to act, the better choices to make, and then also not resent what was, right? It's like, we don't have to resent that the food system is kind of hard to handle sometimes. And we don't have to resent when doctors didn't actually help us, right? When an OBGYN didn't, help me with my PCOS because they just kind of gave me birth control, or my gastroenterologist kind of just told me I had IBS and just wanted to give me medication for it. Like, we don't have to resent that. We just have to know that there is another way. But we have to start with the foundation, though, underneath all of that there is a way to actually thrive. And we have to have a new understanding of what it means to take care of our body. We have to have a new understanding of like the purpose of food and the reason why like we have food on this earth that's been given to us. So we have to have a new understanding of the foundations there and then build off of it. But without shame, without resentment of ourselves or the other people in our lives that might have made it easier for ourselves to binge eat in the past or whatever it has been. So yeah, there's a lot going on there, but I think it's all about accepting where we've been and knowing that there is a path forward. And I think for some people too, sometimes they just don't know that knowledge though, of like, they really don't know how to solve their gut health issues. They've just been told that they have something going on and they don't know what to do. So sometimes like I, as a guide and a coach for them, like can just literally give them that new knowledge, but it is up to them to actually start to believe that they're capable of thriving and functioning differently.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like our society hates any sort of discipline, right? Like, discipline's a dirty word, and it's something that I've always been trying to understand the balance between, because there's a lot of times where, and for me, a lot of it's much more to do with like my business building journey and the challenges that come up when I'm trying to get to the next level, and, stuff that is in my like you were saying before, all that stuff inside that's been in there since we were like 5 years old or whatever, or even earlier, possibly in previous generations that are all in there. It's something where it's like, oh man, like, do I really have to change? It'd be a lot easier if I could just like stay the same and not have to deal with this. And so I've just noticed like there's this mindset where you have to realize that you have to look at the results you're getting, right? Like, what are the results you're getting and what are the behaviors that are driving those results? And how is the way that you're operating or the way that you're being actually creating that outcome? Because like you were saying, you can't have control over everything, right? Like, you can't actually really control the results and the outcome for anything. Like, we like to think we can, but we can't. But if you notice that you're getting a certain result that you can tie back to a behavior that you're engaging in, then I don't see any reason why we can't have these conversations around like, well, how effective is that behavior? Is that creating a good outcome? Is that something that you want to keep doing? Like, what's going to happen in a year from now if that continues, or 5 years or 10 years from now? So I feel like we've gotten, this is going to be a little controversial. I feel like we've gotten kind of soft as a society where it's like, you can't say anything about like telling someone that maybe their behavior is the cause of the problems that they're having, or, oh, I'm going to do whatever I want and I'm going to love myself and it doesn't matter what I do because I'm just going to like do whatever I feel like. And I just feel like, I don't know. again, people can do whatever they want. So honestly, this is not me saying like, if that's you, that, you're a bad person. Honestly, you're probably the one that's experiencing the detriment of those, decisions. But it is something where I feel like we're in this phase of society, I don't even know what to call it, this era where people are really railing against any sort of purposeful behavior change and discipline because they look at it as being like restrictive and harmful and like, just all the words that you want to throw in there. And if you're not a believer, I would never expect somebody to have the same perspective, right? Like we have to kind of like say, okay, believers have this way that they should be following, and you can kind of learn about it. And if you're not a believer, then obviously you're led by the world, which has its own way of operating. And so I just feel like we're getting into this era where just even talking about being disciplined sounds like, oh, you're so mean or you're so harsh or this is like diet culture or whatever. And like I get the avoiding the shame-based decisions, the shame-based behavior, the, oh, you're not good enough, so you got to change, that kind of stuff. But something like I was just having this conversation this morning about this idea that it's because God loves me that he's bringing things to my attention that need to change about the way that I operate. And it's like, yeah, it sucks because excuse my language, but it's like, I really don't want to change it. And it's stuff that's really deep in there. And it's like, oh, this isn't just like simple surface level changes. This is like really getting to the root of big issues that probably affect a lot of areas of my life. But I also know, okay, if I don't change, God still loves me. So it's like, all right, well, that's not going to change. But if I don't change, also like, what's the ripple effect? What's the consequence? And when I start to see the consequences happening, and it's not like major consequences, right? It's not like nobody's dying, nothing terrible is happening, but the consequences that it's creating in my life, then I get to choose, like, do I want to change and see a different outcome and, maybe change the trajectory of my life, my kids' lives, like my grandkids' lives, my whole like a lot of ripple effect that it can have. Or do I want to stay where I am? Yeah, God still loves me, but like, what am I not going to experience in life? What am I not going to be able to put out into the world because I'm not willing to deal with some of the challenges that I have? So I know that just went in a really weird direction, but it's something that I've been thinking about, and I feel like it's really relevant to our conversation. Any thoughts?
No, I totally agree. I mean, there's a lot to say about society right now, but I think even just like, I was having a conversation this morning with one of my clients about the way that like her doctor was talking to her about her health issues. And this was related, I guess, in a sense, but it's like, oh, this is all we can do. Like for Hashimoto's, this is all we can do for Hashimoto's. We really just treat the thyroid. And it's like, I think that if we really thought about it, everything can kind of come back to like, if we ask why, like, why is this happening? And not in an obsessive way, but say like, there's probably something more here. And we can even ask that about our own lives and behaviors of like, why don't I feel good? And we can really start to ask why. And even like, why am I eating the food that I'm eating? Where did this food come from? And why is it made this way? I love getting into like talking about food as it naturally grows. And so there's just so much that comes back to digging deeper and asking, why is this happening? Why do I feel this way? And we have the ability to actually change what we're doing. And it's going to require us to have a new mindset. It's going to require us to think differently. It's going to require us to actually start being an advocate for ourselves. It's going to require us to be a pioneer sometimes too, especially in our social circles. People are not going to want to eat the way that we're eating. They're not going to believe in that. Our doctors are not maybe always going to help us in the way that we think. Like if you know that food is a huge part of PCOS, and like, then know that and don't take no for an answer, and seek something else. So it's a roundabout way of answering your question, but I think that there's just so much more, and we need to understand like the purpose and the foundation behind things. I think as society, we often like don't want to do that, or even to say that like, the food system is pretty poor. So when I go to the store and like, oh, look, all these fun products, it's like, no, actually, a lot of these things are not good for me. And like, that's okay. And that's not diet culture telling me that. That is just the truth. And I think that as a society, we can kind of get a little bit soft on what the truth is. So yeah, I like to bring that to my clients too. Obviously, I do it in a gentle way, but I can see that sometimes the truth is really hard. It's really, really hard to hear.
Yeah. Ooh, I like spicy Victoria.
Yeah.
Well, it is. And it's one of these things, like you said, like just because you feel a certain way, like feelings are not truth, right? Like feelings are fine. Feelings are information that we can use, but it's not truth. And so just because you feel like eating something, just because something looks good, does that mean that it's good to eat? No. Like, I feel like we had this moment where, yeah, we went a little too far, and especially in the functional and integrative space and like paleo and all the ancestral health stuff, where it started getting shamey about it, which again, making changes based on shame is never the right way to do things. It's never going to work. It's just going to make you feel worse, and it's a terrible place to live. But we also have to be realistic. Like you were saying about the food supply, it is designed to be not good on our bodies. Like it's designed to be addictive. It's designed to make us want more. It's completely devoid of nutrients. Like, I don't think we have to be shaming ourselves to realize that this stuff is not created for our well-being. And I feel like there's so much of that in our society today, especially anything that's like pleasure focused. And now I'm going to get real weird, but just anything like entertainment, music, like all the stuff that our society is creating for pleasure and enjoyment, a lot of it is stuff that's actually harmful for us, whether that's physically harmful, mentally, spiritually, whatever. And so we have to have discernment. We have to be able to say, hey, is that actually good for me? And we're not saying to live this like joyless life. Like, I know, I'm sure you have a lot of joy in life. I have a lot of joy in life. Like, I enjoy food. I enjoy things that were created for enjoyment. It's not saying that you can't have pleasure. And I think there's a lot of pleasure that can be had from naturally occurring foods, or even some of the stuff in moderation, right? Like a little bit here and there is probably not going to really harm anybody. But I just think, assuming that we can just operate in the world where anything that is attractive or appealing to us is just fair game, that's not really the way that, like, if you read the Bible, it's not really, the way that we're called to operate. And I know, sometimes that can really turn people off, and, it's very triggering to a lot of people. But I mean, the Bible says that the gospel is offensive. So if people are offended by it, it's kind of to be expected. So anyway, I could go on that tangent for about another hour. So I'm going to like slow my roll a little bit, but it is something where, again, it doesn't have to be shame. I don't think, shame is the only motivator. And I'm sure you would agree with that. Right. It's just, you can't just kind of drift through life, letting the world dictate what you should do, what you should want, what's normal, what's not normal, and expect to have positive outcomes, whether that's health outcomes or anything else.
And that's why, honestly, like, I work with people who are also not believers, but I also work with a lot of believers because they really are attracted to my approach, because I think that having to be able to pray about these changes that we're making, as we're working together to overcome PCOS, or as we're going through a gut health protocol and, the testing and the supplements, like, I believe that prayer is a huge necessity as a part of that, because it's going to help us actually be able to like discern better and to say like, wow, there's a truth here that's hard. And to realize that like, I haven't been doing the best I could be doing. And like, but now that I know, I can't unsee that, right? I think there's joy in discipline. I think there's joy at the end of that too. So I think that it does require, though, a change of heart, and requires trust to say that like, there's a purpose in walking this journey, and there's a purpose to saying no to certain things. So I love to kind of bring that as, into what I'm doing. And even just to say like, if you're meeting with your doctor and you just don't quite agree, or you just know in your gut, pun intended, that like, it's not okay, like that there's got to be something more, like there is something more. And that's like what I really try to provide to my clients, like just the physical benefit of saying, okay, if you have chronic gut health issues, let's do something different. Like, right, medication might not be the answer for you. Sometimes it can be helpful, but what I do is, we do gut health testing. There needs to be something more that we're doing. We need to dig deeper. We really need to get to the root cause. And I believe that the Lord wants that for us. I believe that that is good. And even with PCOS, like, he wants us to get to the root cause of that too. He wants us to know that like, there's a reason behind why we have weight loss resistance. And like, that is okay for us to dig deeper into that. And it might include some things beyond just diet and exercise. It might include something new, and that is okay. So we need to kind of start off with this understanding that our eyes are going to be opened. And because they're going to be opened, like knowing that, okay, they will be opened, we need to be ready to actually make changes that are different than before, right? It's insanity to keep doing the things over and over again that produce the same output. So working with me, like, your eyes will be opened, but if you put the effort in, like, you will see changes. And it's really beautiful when my clients the ones who are most successful, they're the ones who are willing to actually be humbled, to realize what they have done that wasn't helpful for them, and to truly just listen in our sessions and say like, yeah, I want to change and I want to put the effort in and I want to tell people about this, right? Like I want to start being an advocate of my own health. So a little bit of a tangent.
I love it. No, I love it. And it brings to mind the scripture. I don't remember what book it's in. I think Paul wrote, everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. So it's like, yeah, like you don't have to feel terrible about yourself if you make a choice, right? Like, and I know, obviously that's more related to like habits and that kind of thing. I think he was actually talking about food because of the whole like Jewish law around food, which is funny. But it's that idea that it's like, yeah, you could do stuff that used to be like off limits. Is it always going to be beneficial? No. And I know it's a different context for them because they didn't have like, donuts and fried chicken and stuff back then. But it is something where it's like, hey, I can do whatever I want, but not all my choices are going to be beneficial. And can God kind of steer me in the direction of the things that will be more beneficial? And am I willing to take a hard look at stuff that I'm doing that's not beneficial either for me or other people? So I think that's great that you are able to have those hard conversations with your clients. I feel like I'm constantly having them with myself as well as like practicing on how to have them with clients in a gentle way. Cause I'm kind of one of those people that just goes like straight for the jugular on the truth thing. And I've been told before, it's like, okay, you might want to like pad that a little bit. Like
sandwich, like, my roommates talk about like, a little sandwich,
Yeah. And I'm like, but I just want people to know the truth. Like, I don't want to like soften it or water it down, but it is something where, having that truth and being able to see it and not feel shame and just realize like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to take a different step or a different approach. I feel like in any area of our lives that we're trying to see a change in, like that's the first step, is to be willing to see what you've been doing that hasn't been working.
Yeah. And that really goes back to like that first piece, or, the Be Do Have, or my health freedom framework, like the faith. That's really where it starts. And it's, are we willing to see something new? Are we willing to actually think about our thoughts? Like, what do I believe right now about my body and my health, my actions, my behaviors? And working with me, like I said, the people who are most successful are people who are really willing to have a new experience there, and they're really willing to be humbled.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know we could probably talk about this for another hour, so we'll have to have you back on the show. But for those people who are listening that are like, oh my gosh, this sounds like I need some loving truth about my health and I need some help navigating all the different information that I'm getting, how can people connect with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so you can visit my website, wonderfullymadenutrition.com. You can also find me on Instagram at wonderfullymade.rd. And yeah, on my website, you can see more about my services and the testing that I offer. And I also have a freebie available on my website. I think we'll link to it in the show notes. But it's the top 3 reasons why you're not losing weight, which sounds really tempting maybe, but I think we're going to, you'll learn something new there and your eyes will be opened that there's something more beyond just what the culture tells us there. So definitely check out that freebie on my website.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Victoria. I know that I'm sure this conversation didn't quite go in the direction that either of us were anticipating, but I think it was good. I always love a good spirit-led conversation. So I'm hoping that we touch some people and change some perspectives, as I always hope to do. But thank you so much for being our guest today. And thanks to those of you for hanging out with us for the last 45, 50 minutes or so. And we'll look forward to seeing you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Hey there, Laura here again. Are you a nutritionist or dietitian struggling to figure out how much to charge for your programs and services? Maybe you've heard that as a nutritionist, you should just charge what you're worth. But this way of thinking can cause you to either undercharge your clients or work yourself into the ground trying to earn your worth. As a healthcare provider, you can't set up a pricing structure that forces you to sacrifice your own health and well-being in the name of your business and your clients. But I promise it doesn't have to be this way. When you download my free profit planning workbook, I'll walk you step by step through the 10-step process for determining the right pricing for your nutrition business. As a nutritionist, you have the power to completely change someone's life for the better. There's huge value in that. So it's time to stop underselling what you do. By following along with this worksheet, you can determine exactly what you need to charge to achieve your revenue goals with ease. I'll teach you everything I've learned about pricing from growing my own nutrition business to over $250,000 in revenue annually and helping other dietitian and nutrition entrepreneurs hit their first $10,000 to $30,000 months and beyond. To get your free workbook, go to lauraschoenfeld.com/profit, PROFIT, and grab your copy today, so you no longer have to wonder how to set the right rates for your incredibly valuable nutrition services. That's lauraschoenfeld.com/profit. It's time to make the money that you deserve as a nutritionist, and I can't wait to help you get there.